Welcome everybody to the GitLab 13.9 milestone retrospective discussion. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to be talking a bit about the lessons and learnings and ups and downs of this most recent milestone that we just released. In terms of how we're spending the time today, it's a 25-minute discussion. We're going to spend a few minutes reviewing previous improvement tasks from last time. We've got a couple discussion topics picked out, so we're going to spend about 7 minutes each on those. And then we'll spend the last 5 minutes talking about improvements that we want to track for the next release. So diving into that first section of previous retrospective improvement tasks, things that we talked about last time, want to check in on this time. I think, Jerome, you've got the first item there.
Hey everyone. So the product intelligence team, we've been aiming to make it easier for other teams to work with analytics. And we're trying to push for more and more standardization across naming conventions and implementation methods. So that was one of our improvement tasks last time, was to provide an update on our progress. So since the last milestone, we've now implemented a standard schema across our backend and front-end snowplow events. And we've also moved our metrics dictionary, which was previously in a Google Sheet, over to YAML files, and we're now automatically generating all of those YAML files. I've also provided a link to the roadmap for more details.
Great progress. Anything that, say, an engineer on a different team or manager might need to do, be aware of there, or is it just kind of FYI that we're standardizing?
We're actually going to be putting together a workshop at the end of Q1 where we'll be running through all of the new instructions for how do you actually implement analytics, how do you name them, how do you actually see them in the data warehouse. So more details to follow.
Great stuff, thank you. Craig, I think we're on to you.
Yep. So I had a task to follow up on the retro from backend maintainers from last month. I'd like to say there's more progress than there has been, but there just hasn't. I submitted an MR as a first step to start pulling domain expertise into IP's GitLab review workload dashboard, and I will work with him to continue to move that forward. The goal there is to, right now you can separate by the types of maintainers, so backend, front end, et cetera. And the ultimate goal there is to display domain expertise so that if you need a reviewer, someone available to look at a specific domain expertise, you can just click on that and see who they are. So a little bit of progress there. I know the biggest theme from that retro was, should we push more towards domain expertise? And sad to say, haven't made any real progress there. I know a lot of people are doing it locally. I know certainly I am with my teams, but yeah, I'm hoping to pick this up later if somebody else wants to run with the torch on this retro. I'd be more than happy to share the load on that one, but that's where we are.
All right, thanks for the update, Craig. Yep. Andre, you want to jump in with the MR reviewer feature? I know this was an active topic of discussion last time.
Yes, Sam, thank you. And this ties in perfectly with what Craig was talking about. So last retrospective, we talked about how some teams were struggling with the inconsistency of review process amongst many teams. And so during this month, me and Michelle, we kicked off an effort to consolidate all the feedback gathered through either the issue and the merge request of a proposal. And we've drilled it down to a one proposal for new process that is fully supported by the current feature set that we have and doesn't collide with the roadmap of the feature as it's being developed by our team. So right now we have that proposal in a validation period with the maintainers. All maintainers have been brought to that issue, and there's a slide deck. So I would encourage everyone who's interested on the topic to check the issue, check the slides. And if you have any questions or anything is not super clear, please let us know during the validation period so that we can incorporate that to the final process. We already had amazing tips from maintainers on how to be more explicit about some things that were ambiguous. So we're going to be including that in the documentation update. The timeline is to have this validation period run until Friday, March 12th. So that's not this Friday, but the next one, next week's. And we look to activate the new process, make sure that everybody is activating at the same time a validated process on March 18th with the new milestone starting 13/11. And by then, documentation will be updated and everybody will be warned or communicated widely through all the channels we have at our disposal. So there's a link there. Again, thanks, Michelle, for collaborating on this issue. It's been very, very helpful. And yeah, any questions of the unidentified impact, please let us know. Anything that we might be missing on that issue, and please let us know. Even if it doesn't seem like it, we'd rather be safe than sound. Safe. Yeah, that's that's it. Any other questions at this point? Or can we move on?
Thanks for the update. And yeah, I'll just mention that I think it's a great example of where dog fooding, we got a lot of feedback, a lot of learning very quickly from that. So dog fooding win. Christopher, you want to talk about the friends and family?
Yeah, I got the next two. Real quick, friends and family, we just got added yesterday, a couple more. The first one was in March 19th. That looked close enough past the usual deadline for development of the 18th. So it felt like that shouldn't be too much of a concern. The 16th is a little bit more concerning, though the 18th falls on a Sunday. So in that particular case, basically we're moving it from Friday back to Thursday, I believe. So I'd love to get your feedback from folks if they feel like that's something that we need to either consider an exception or some kind of shift developments, friends and family day to the following week or things of that nature. And then the 28th is not in the same time frame as the release, and it's also backed up against all U.S. holiday weekend, I believe. So that seems like a pretty good place. But I'm looking for additional feedback there if folks feel like that's going to make things more difficult in planning. And then the other one was following up on a review for the token incident. Basically, we want to just make sure that we can upgrade our product in different ways. This was an example where we didn't really have a good upgrade strategy associated with it, and the team's working on that specifically. But I wanted to do basically an audit, and this unfortunately fell through the cracks for me in the last month. But I have created an issue, and when I can't get something done, then the best thing to do is help other people to step up and get an opportunity. So current assignment is currently Chun, but he's looking to delegate or further look for a volunteer to potentially drive this. And the idea here is just to go to each team, ask them about if there's anything that they know of that can't currently be upgraded, so we can get it prioritized with product, so that we can make a great GitLab.com product. Back to you, Sam.
Awesome, thanks for that. So those are the items we're reviewing from last time. Now it's time to jump into kind of the meaty discussion topics. We proposed 3 discussion topics. Thanks to Victor for proposing number 2 there. There was a vote on them, and we voted for 1 and 2. So those are the topics we're planning to discuss. Feel free to discuss topic 3 async. So jumping off, first topic is automated testing. As the moderator, kind of reviewing everybody's notes that they submitted in this agenda, there's definitely a theme there where if you look at what went wrong this milestone, that section, a lot of mentions of testing and various, various aspects of that, I'll say. So thought it was worth kind of pulling that out. Anybody feel free to jump in with your thoughts at any point here, but looking for, are there things that are successful, success stories, things that have worked well for your team there? And, kind of where do you see the technical challenges that make testing difficult? Are there ways that it could be made easier? Obviously, as our quality expectations our customers have around quality increase over time, this gets harder and harder. So how do we get better and better at it? Anyone have a test that caught a problem? Story like that?
I can help open up the conversation. Yeah, we do have a few occasions that the end-to-end, what we call it the automated QA test, has caught regression bugs. We have a number of them that we can pull up, but I do think that we need to move to a compromise where it's not always the end-to-end layer which is the most expensive. For example, the number of incidents that we see before, we have great unit test coverage, but coincidentally, those edge cases can be caught at that level. So it needs to be moved up one level higher, which is the integration and spec. So I'm looking forward to hear as well where are the gaps in this new integration frameworks or environments, or maybe being ambitious and setting, do we need another smaller staging for these satellite projects that we need to set up? We can use to set up a 1K reference architecture and then move fast there. So I want to hear this loud and clear as well, what we can do better.
I'll add something. So within Secure and Protect, we've identified that we want to be a bit closer to our quality, the end-to-end test that Mac just mentioned. So Will Meek, who heads up testing for Secure and Protect, is actually organizing a brown bag, a workshop, and then we're identifying some DRIs, both back end and front end, that are going to work closely with Will to really ramp up, because I think they're quite segregated right now. There's not a lot of crossover. When I hear end to end, I don't think much about my team partaking in those, and we really should be. We should be well versed and familiar. And thank you for Lindsay Kerr for really steering this initiative in terms of the DRI, and thank you for Mech for initiating this and realizing we do need to bridge this gap.
Thank you, Neil. Sarah, do you want to verbalize here?
Yeah. So one thing that we've been talking about a lot in CI and pipeline authoring is that we have a certain number of cases where we can have such a high level of combinations that being able to visually test things and avoid visual regressions is becoming more and more complicated. So we've been spending a little bit of time digging into what it would look like and what it would take to make visual testing an option for some of our sections as like a manual approach. So that some sections can bring in more of the like front end automated testing to know things are booking right as well.
I can speak a little bit to visual testing. We do have a trial subscription to a tool called ApplyTools, and that's a visual regression at the end-to-end layer, so we get to see at the browser level. We've been trying to push regression down at the component level. Are you saying that that's not enough at the component level, that we do need to see visual regression integrated as a whole page to catch these things in CI or in those areas?
I think it's about being able to, yes, do it at the component level and be able to specify like various combinations that we're testing, right? So the end-to-end test is probably not testing like a pipeline that has every single possible pipeline job that you can have, and upstream and downstream and in dark mode. And like it very quickly becomes like such a high combination level that to me, trying to put it in every set of tests, right, would take a lot of time and be sort of prohibitive, but as a tool that various teams could use to run internally when they know they're changing those sections might help us avoid some visual regressions.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add that we felt the same thing in code review. Thanks, Sarah, for bringing this up, and especially important since we don't use technologies like Shadow DOM in our components that isolate the styling. So the style bleeds. So every time somebody's making a change on utility classes or any change that affects CSS broadly, we might have effects that we don't forecast, and the tests won't catch it if they're not doing the visual testing. So very, very important. Thanks, Sarah.
So let me repeat that back before I give it to. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Beck.
So just to recap, I think we want to close out the gap on the integrated end-to-end, integrated visual regression as a whole, not just components. I think that's the signal I'm getting. We can gear on that. Cool. Thank you. Back to you, Sam.
Yeah, maybe that you could make a follow-up item for next time too, potentially if someone wants to grab that. Christopher, I think you had the next comment, and then I do want to be mindful that we save some time for the next discussion topic. So maybe a few more minutes on this, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, Mac, something to think about, and I know this would be expensive for us to implement, but I do wonder if it would get us potentially there faster. Is one of the problems that I've seen anecdotally is we could potentially push these into unit tests, but then we're going to have super specific unit. I call it super specific unit testing, meaning you have to have a lot of them, and they're very cumbersome, particularly when things change. So I wonder if we're actually better off kind of focusing on the small environments. I also wonder whether or not we can somehow make those smaller environments cheaper, either through memory DB type schemes or something like that, so that, like, it's much more isolated from that perspective. So if you have proposals like that you want to kind of rally around, I'd be curious to hear them from that perspective.
I'm going to spend only 1 more minute or 30 give time back. So I think let's do it in the ops working group. I think with the satellites projects with the runner, I think we can experiment with the simplest, smallest setup and go from there. The pattern here is that if we find that it's so difficult writing unit tests, it's obviously clear that we need to move up 1 layer up if it makes it productive in writing tests.
Excellent. Well, great discussion there. Thank you, everybody. And then, yeah, time-wise, I think we'll move on to the next topic, which is about our design system. Yeah, this came from a specific team, and I'll just read it. Our design system still doesn't cover for many cases, and it's impossible to easily and quickly introduce new functionality to existing components. Changes go through a design discussion, planning, implementation, so that can block an issue that's, I guess, needs changes right away. Tori, you got the first comment there?
Yeah, I can provide some color from at least the foundation's perspective, which is the team that helps facilitate contributing to and utilizing pajamas. So from our perspective, we definitely don't want to cultivate an expectation that a component needs to exist in pajamas before stage groups can utilize it for their feature work or work on their feature work. We want pajamas to be an aid, but not a blocker. So we view it in the same way as any open source project, where we do hope that stage groups will contribute back to pajamas and make their contributions available to everyone. A common scenario that I have seen is that a product team will create a new component or variation inside the GitLab repository in order to move their feature work forward. Then a front-end engineer will open an issue or a merge request to move the component to GitLab UI, which is our component library. And then a designer will open an issue to update any documentation in pajamas if that's needed. We also have what we call a component lifecycle, which has 4 stages. And I can link the docs we have for that in the agenda in a second. But the first 3 stages are meant to be flexible to help the build process in order to allow teams to kind of come in at any inflection point so they can contribute back to pajamas without having to follow a rigid process. So hopefully that will help with some of this, and the foundation team is here to help facilitate that as well. And then lastly, I just want to point out that we sent out a survey recently so that we can look at how we can improve contributing and utilizing pajamas. So we opened an epic and I linked it here in the docs or in the agenda doc. So feel free to contribute back to that if your teams do have additional ideas on how we can make it easier to contribute and easier to use what we do have in pajamas.
Thanks for that, Tori. Anoop, looked like you had the next comment.
Yeah, I was listening to it and I may be recommending something that I don't fully understand, but I'm going to just take a leap of faith here and say, is this something we can consider to be part of just an engineering principle, where if a stage team needs a new component and it's not there in pajamas, and they could either collaborate with the pajamas team or they contribute it, and it would require some sort of a contribution architecture. But that way we will continuously make pajamas better and better and easier for the next team to use.
I would love that. I think that would be amazing. So I'm completely on board.
Does the silence mean it's a very difficult thing to do? And is that why people are hesitating to comment? Feel free to disagree. I'm just trying to understand what's going on as well.
Nope, I think it's totally doable. So in recent milestones, it does require a bit of planning and flexibility. So recently we had a situation like that where we realized we needed something that was described in pajamas but wasn't implemented yet. And the way we did it was exactly as Story described it. We built it into the product and we scheduled follow-up issues to add it to the product, and then another issue to replace the implementation we had done with the implementation of GitLab UI. And Samantha Ming took ownership of that, and it worked pretty fluidly. And she insisted on being the one cleaning it up. So I feel like it helps everyone, that mentality of open source that Tori was describing. If it's described for engineers to embody, it's great.
I'm going to be somewhat contrarian. Nope. So I think it's an engineering principle. So I don't think I disagree with you from that perspective. I think the challenge that you have is that if you look at most open source projects and the way we're doing iteration, I think the reason why you're getting silence is because what most people think about is that you have to create the component first, which means you got to think about all the architectural things that kind of go along with that, consider all the different aspects of it. I think in our model, actually a much better way of thinking is it's a principle still, but if a stage or team is seeing something that looks like it should be componentized, they should be actually able to get that work prioritized effectively so that they can go back and do the work post implementation of a feature, right? And I think that's what's missing right now is we don't necessarily have that either forum or way to basically address that in a proactive manner, albeit after we kind of understand what the problem is and what we're thinking about in that particular case. Because I guarantee that if we start with this, what's going to happen is it's going to delay feature development, which is going to consequently cause frustration and probably not give us what we're looking for. Because at least historically, if you read literature, historically in software development, the best components are built after they've been implemented once or twice, not in the first iteration.
Got it. Thank you.
Great discussion there. Thanks everyone for that. Time-wise, I think we'll cut it off there, although it sounds like there's some good follow-up discussion and ideas that came out of that. Moving on now to the last section of the discussion, talking about improvements we want to make for next release. So, we're always trying to learn and get better at GitLab. So this is stuff that we're looking forward to next month. We want to check in on. Kenny, I think you've got the first item on there.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think we have great participation from all members of product groups in the individual group retrospective level, but we tend to talk about the retrospective being more of a development and particularly quality activity at this level, especially as we're doing these rollouts. And so I have an issue to make sure that we broaden that scope to make sure it's inclusive of all R&D functions, including product. And for me, that included both making sure we channel the learnings across all of the different functions, as well as have participation. And then Christopher, you have a follow-up point on that regard.
Yeah, just that you could always start at the top, or the person running the show. So we decided to go to quarterly participation. Sam has done February, March, and he'll do April. So I'm looking for somebody for FY Q2 to basically run. So if any volunteers outside of development, they're welcome to run the show for a bit.
I knew I was going to walk into that trap. I can see your
eyes staring at me. I didn't say you specifically.
I'd love to do it though. You got to hear. I'd love to do it. So
but I do hear a volunteer. That's what I just heard. So
yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Thank you. Is Daniel Croft online with the next one? I think Daniel. Yeah, okay. I can vocalize that then. So yeah, tracking cross-group dependencies for the package team, using a new label to improve awareness as well as better communication and expectations. So there's a link there that folks can check out around how they're using labels to track that coordination. Nick, do you want to jump in with yours? All right. Maybe we'll move that one to the end just in case. I'll read it if not. Lindsay, on to you.
Sure.
And a continued effort to improve our iteration and efficiency. One engineer proposed or shared some ways that he's been able to move MRs through the review process faster. So we're going to continue to focus on those improvements that are listed there and see how that improves everyone's satisfaction and the mean time to merge, as well as other metrics surrounding MR rates.
Well, thanks for sharing that. As I was kind of scrubbing through the what can we improve, that was that one kind of stuck out, and so I did ask Lindsay to share that and kind of let us know next time how it's going. Mech, on to you.
Thank you. So this came up in our discussion today. I'll commit on how to structure a better broadcast celebrations where tests are catching bugs more broadly. I think quality is everyone's responsibility. It's also everyone's celebration. So I'll work on the next iteration of that for us.
Awesome. I was just going to say that's great because it's one of those areas similar to incidents where no one really notices when it goes well, but it's very visible, when you have problems. So yeah, it's nice to be able to that. And then I'll just read the last one. Nick is on PTO today. I did ask him to ask if I could move this into the action items. He's looking at retrospective engagement, and by some measures, we've seen that decline lately. And so one thing they're trying in their team is having a reminder every week, I believe, where they kind of keep track of what's going on, keep notes of that. And then the idea is that makes it a lot easier at the end of the month to kind of remember what happened and pull out those learnings. So thought that was a great experiment. Interested to hear how it goes, and potentially something we could use more widely if it's effective. And with that, brings us to the end of our retrospective agenda. Just a couple minutes over time here. Thanks for everybody for participating, and I'll see you next month.